This is the Read to Lead podcast, episode 388.
Being able to put yourself in someone else's shoes and really intelligently imagine their experience and feel it, that is empathy. And that is a skill that can be cultivated. It's not just an on or off switch. It's something you can actually choose to lean into and to get better at.
When COVID-19 became a global pandemic, somebody hit a reset button on the economy. Economists have begun referring to the 2020 event as the Great Reset button, as lockdowns and health scares caused dramatic shifts in the business and economic landscape across the world. What does this reset mean for entrepreneurs and their place in the economy as they build or rebuild a business in 2020 and beyond? Hi, I'm Jeff Brown, and this is the Read to Lead podcast. Glad you're here. I believe that if you want to achieve true success in business and in life, then a habit of intentional reading is a must. I wrote the book on it. Literally, it's called Read to Lead, the simple habit that expands your influence and boosts your career. With co-author Jesse Wisniewski. It's available now. Find out more at readtoleadbook.com. Each week, we're joined right here on this show by another author to chat about their latest book and their unique insights on things like personal and professional development, leadership, productivity, career, business, marketing, sales, and today, entrepreneurship. In a moment, we'll sit down with my friend and new author, John Meese. He's written a book called Survive and Thrive, How to Build a Profitable Business in Any Economy, including this one. I'll ask John to share what he means when he says real entrepreneurs get paid, but they don't work for money, why he believes empathy is a skill that can determine your ability to succeed, the difference between a gateway product, a flagship product, and a continuity product, and plenty more. If you want to learn the smarter way to read books, get better at choosing the books you do read, or learn how to develop a more consistent reading habit, I encourage you to pick up my brand new book, Read to Lead, the simple habit that expands your influence and boosts your career. You can find out all about it at readtoleadbook.com. There you can even download the introduction and the first chapter for free. And I encourage you, too, to think about someone you know who maybe isn't yet convinced that this is a habit they need to have in their lives. Part 1 of the book, which I'm betting you can probably skip, makes an argument for why you need to read books. Who in your life needs to hear that, needs to understand that, needs to learn that? Maybe this book is for them, too. So what am I saying? I'm saying pick up a few copies. That's what I'm saying. In fact, until the end of September, bulk discounts on the book are still available when you use the discount code READ to LEAD. What is that discount? It's 50% off. That makes each copy right now right around $10 when you order 20 or more. So go to readtoleadbook.com to find out all about that. Choose Baker Books as your retailer, and then Read to Lead as your discount code and get 50% off. You want to buy just a couple? That's fine too. Again, go to readtoleadbook.com to find out more about my new book, Read to Lead. John Meese is CEO of CoWork Inc., co-founder of Notable, and host of the Thrive podcast. And if I'm not mistaken, he's only around 30, 31 years old. That's a lot in a very short period of time. He is an economist turned entrepreneur on a personal mission to eradicate generational poverty by helping entrepreneurs create thriving businesses, which is why he wrote his new book and the one we're talking about today, Survive and Thrive, How to Build a Profitable Business in Any Economy, including this one. John, it's a pleasure to have you here. Welcome officially to the Read to Lead podcast.
Jeff, thank you so much for this opportunity, and thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure to connect, period, but also to talk about this important book.
Now, I'm sure you get picked on with the age thing. You say in your book that, strangers are quick to tell you look 15.
I was going to say, good, you got that reference. Yeah, it happens a lot. Anybody who's listening to this wouldn't know, I suppose, but I'm wearing glasses and a button-up. If I take off the glasses and the button-up, like I'm going to a birthday party with my son later this afternoon, and I'll be wearing a t-shirt. Well, that's usually when it happens. Is if I'm just like dressed down at all, casual at all, then strangers are quick to remind me, you have 3 kids and 3 businesses. You don't look a day older, 15 or 16. So I'm told that's a gift, and honestly, I've grown to embrace it. But I've also grown to make sure that when I'm in public, I'm usually wearing a button-up and glasses because I do appear. It gives me about 5 years. I age about 5 years when I put those on. So instead of 15, I look like I'm 20.
Still 10 or 11 years younger than you actually are.
Yes, I'm 30 if you're curious. I'm 30 years old. Yeah.
Well, I had the opposite problem. When I was 18, people thought I was 32. So I don't know what that says about me now because I'm much older than both of those ages now. Well, how does someone in such a relatively short period of time seemingly accomplish so much? On the Enneagram, you have to be a 3. Am I right about that?
No, I'm an Enneagram 1, but I'm a social 1. So if you're familiar with the Enneagram, then there's subtypes and 9 types. And so I'm an Enneagram 1, often referred to as the perfectionist or a moral reformer. But the social subtype means my energy is sort of outward looking. In other words, I don't just want to do the right thing like a perfectionist. I want to help you do the right thing because it's outward facing energy. So that's me. Yeah. I am often pegged as a 3. I think probably because I've worked with so many Enneagram 3s and there are so many in the like podcast and blogging world. I think more than any other type. I
love that here you are at 30 years old. You've got your first book out. I'm sure it won't be your last. What's the whole process up to now been like for you?
I was talking to my wife about it this morning, actually. By the way, that's another thing I do whenever I have conversations. Pretty early, I reference my wife and my kids. It helps people date me. So that's no, but I was genuinely talking to my wife about this morning. It's weird. It's like it's a combination of it's exciting, but it just feels like it feels like it's meant to be.
Okay.
And so there's an element of like I feel like what I've done actually is I feel like I've finally accepted the role that I'm supposed to play in this life, in this world. That it's sort of like up until now I've been kind of goofing around, and now I like actually am doing my job, which is that I'm an author. That's what it feels like. It feels like I've actually just said, okay, I'm an author. And I'm excited to do it. And it was a lot of work to write this book, as you know. And I've already written the second one. So I'm addicted to it now.
John will apparently be making a second visit on the Read to Lead podcast in the not too distant future. So, well, let's dig into some of the book here.
Sure.
And I want to have you talk a bit about what you call the entrepreneur's paradox that you introduced right away in the first chapter. What do you mean when you say that real entrepreneurs get paid, but they don't work for money?
Yeah, I mean, this is something, I had to learn early on in business, and a lot of business owners really struggle with this. It's this weird paradox, right? It's not a contradiction. A paradox is, are two things that seem like they contradict, but they really are true at the same time. And in this case, it's that entrepreneurs get paid, but they don't work for money. The most successful businesses, the most successful entrepreneurs, startups, come from a desire to create real solutions to real problems for real people. Those are the most successful entrepreneurs. And so if you want to start a business, you need to get clear on the fact that your job is to solve real problems for real people. And the solutions are typically your products or your services. Now, of course, the reason why you're in business, part of that has to do with the fact, a big part of that, naturally. There's no shame in admitting that you need to and want to make money from your efforts, right? So you do actually need to get paid, right? To be a successful entrepreneur, you do need to generate profit. You do need to make enough money to support your family, to support your lifestyle, to support your employees, your business, all of those things. And that's a wonderful thing. I personally view profit as a scorecard for how well I've served humanity. And that's just my philosophy when I approach business. And that shapes everything I do, that the question becomes not just how do we squeeze more dollars out of this product, but it becomes how do we really craft this experience that it's going to be a transformation that's going to improve someone's life and solve real problems they're experiencing on a daily basis and create so much value that they are glad to hand over their money. I like this. Rabbi Daniel Lapin talks about how he refers to dollars as certificates of appreciation with presidents' faces on them. And it's just like when someone gives you a certificate of appreciation with the president's face on it, that's a wonderful feeling. So that's what I mean when I say real entrepreneurs get paid, but they don't work for money.
In one of the examples in the book that you just reminded me of, where you talked about how you gladly gave your money to this company, and that was when you discovered the Dollar Shave Club.
Yes.
Yeah, and you estimated you've spent maybe $1,000, maybe more now since the book's
I looked it up. I spent over $1,000 with Dollar Shave Club. It's in their name too, dollar. Right, so their promise early on was pretty alluring. It was like for $1, you can get a very simple razor that does one job and solves a real problem in your life. And the real problem in your life, here's the real problem for me. The real problem I have is that just enough hair grows out of my face that I need to shave on a regular basis, but not enough to rock the glorious beard that, Jeff, you are right now. So that's my problem. And I'm sure I'm not the only guy who's done this, or gal, walking down a line looking at the dozens of razors and the 17 different kinds of shaving cream and going, oh my gosh. But you're walking through with this sort of like false confidence. Like there's people around you. You're an adult. You want them to think you know what you're doing. So you confidently grab a razor and walk out, and then you don't really know what you're doing. I mean, and a lot of these businesses, so those aren't startups. Most of those razor and companies, I mean, these are businesses that have been around for a long time. And at this point, they don't have entrepreneurs at the helm. They have optimizers who are saying, if we have 17 different versions of this product that lasts 2 months and needs so many extra placements, then we can optimize ROI. And so they're just creating more variations of the product, hoping that you'll buy more of them. That's not solving a real problem.
Right.
Dollar Shave Club said, here's a real problem. And by the way, it's a subscription product where they automatically deliver it to your house every time you need a new razor blade. And so it's genius. And then along the way, they started saying, oh yeah, by the way, you probably also need some nice shaving cream. We got some of that. Here's a sample. I liked it. I got some of it, et cetera, et cetera. But all of that came from them solving a real problem in my life. And those are the best businesses.
Well, one word that I keep hearing more lately than ever when it comes to leadership and business is this word empathy. And I think it's safe to say John is an advocate for empathy, and it's a skill that can determine, you say, your ability to succeed. John, why do you believe empathy is so important?
Well, it's a human skill, and business is a human field. And so it's easy to think about the fact that, to really approach business as if it's a bunch of numbers in a spreadsheet, or if it's a product market fit, or any of these other things. But the reality is, once you get clear on the fact that your business is built on creating a real solution to real problems for real people, well, then the next question is, who are the real people that you're going to serve, and what are their real problems? And I don't just mean you can, from the outside, look and say, well, here's all the problems in their life. I mean, how do they feel it? How do they experience it? When they wake up at 2 a.m, staring at the ceiling, dreading a problem in their life that they're worried about, what is it? What kind of words do they use to describe that? Being able to put yourself in someone else's shoes and really intelligently imagine their experience and feel it, that is empathy. And that is a skill that can be cultivated. It's not just an on or off switch. It's something you can actually choose to lean into and to get better at. And so, yes, I refer to it as your empathy advantage. That if you're an entrepreneur who's willing to cultivate your empathy advantage, that's how you'll succeed. That's how you'll succeed in business, is by being able to stay in touch with how your customers' lives are affected by your products or lack thereof.
And that leads me to the question I wanted to ask next that I think is directly related to this, and that's the importance of the transformation, to use your word, when selling your solution to a problem. Talk a bit about what you mean by transformation and selling to that. And secondarily, how do you price products based on transformation?
I mean, the first thing I would say is that this is just how we buy things. As humans, we are, selfish isn't the word, but we're self-centered, right? Because literally our self is at the center of our universe.
Sure.
We see the world through our own eyes. We feel the world through our own hands. We think about the world through our own brain. And so because of that, when we're looking around at products or services we're thinking about buying, even if we're thinking about buying a cup of coffee, what we're doing subconsciously or even consciously is buying a better version of ourselves, of our life. It's by saying, oh, by buying this cup of coffee, I'm going to have more energy, or I'm going to get to enjoy the taste of this. Or this is an excuse to sit down with a friend for a conversation over a shared drink. Whatever it is, you're buying that transformation. The transformation could be as small as saying, I have an extra dose of caffeine that's going to last me 4 hours. Or it could be something more life-changing like therapy, or even going to church. I mean, even going to somewhere like church is still a transformation. You're buying it with your time, right? Most churches, to my knowledge, don't actually charge for it. But you're at least, it's a transaction in that you're spending your time and your energy to go there for some sort of transformation. Whether that's an experience or a spiritual transformation, whatever that may be, these actions we take are typically can fall into one of 3 categories, that we either want to become healthier, wealthier, or happier. I mean, those are essentially the 3 very broad categories that our action can be characterized in. Now, of course, there are plenty of things we do that actually make us less healthy, less wealthy, and sad. So it's not that we're always making the positive choices all the time. But what I'm advocating is that you're helping people make positive choices in your products. Don't sell things that make people less healthy, less wealthy, or less happy. So that's what I mean about transformation. And then secondly, how you price based on that, I will say that's more art than science. And so there's no really, I wish there was a magic formula for how we could do that. And there isn't. But there is one back of the napkin formula that I found works pretty well. And so I think this is a good starting place, but don't feel like you're tied to this. And that's that, what I love in the businesses that I've both built myself and then worked in is when you get raving fans, when you're able to give someone transformation that's worth about 10 times what they paid. In other words, if someone is coming into, the easiest way to look at this is like a financial services or marketing thing because there's dollar to dollar. But if someone's paying you $1,000 to help them with a marketing campaign, and because of your help, they make an extra $10,000, that's a phenomenal deal for them and for you. And so therefore they're more likely to be excited about your business, to love doing business with you. If someone pays you $1,000 and you help them make $1,000, that's a waste of time. But unfortunately, when we take that out of marketing and just put that in other fields, a lot of people approach transactions as if it's a one-to-one relationship, as if, okay, you paid me for $5 worth of clothing, so you're getting $5 worth of clothing, like a crappy t-shirt. It's like, well, that's a waste of time. There's no relationship built there.
Yeah.
We don't owe each other anything after that. And so instead, I prefer to build businesses where you're giving 10 times. And again, with a lot of things, even a coffee shop or whatever that example might be, you do kind of have to ballpark here, right? Like it's hard. You can't quantitatively define exactly what that transformation is worth to someone. And it also varies person to person. But if you can structure it with that concept of saying, look, I'm trying to craft an experience that's worth 10 times what someone's paying me, then you'll have customers lining up to give you money.
Well said. I want to take a detour here for just a second.
Please.
You've been a part of quite a few online businesses. There's, you co-founded Notable WordPress theme business. You were dean of Michael Hyatt's Platform University for a time. You've got the Thrive School podcast. But then a little over a year ago, you launched a co-working space, something that I had wanted to do myself and never got off the ground. But so you launched this co-working space in your community, near where I'm at right now, Columbia, Tennessee, called CoWork Inc. But like less than, 58, 60 days before COVID was confirmed in your community.
Yeah.
How did you navigate that? And talk about where you're at now, being on the other side of it, I would assume.
Sure. Yes, well, I'm currently talking from that co-working space, so spoiler alert, it's still here. But we did have our grand opening January 15th, 2020, which was, in our community, that was 58 days before we closed because we had COVID-19 in our community for the first time, and then we had a lockdown in our state, and so our business was closed for 48 days after being only open for 58 days. Not a great start. And when we reopened, we said, okay, everybody, we're back. Do you want to leave your house and come work with other people elbow to elbow? No, the reality was we didn't send that email. We didn't tell people we were back, but as soon as the lockdown lifted, I recognized that it was just the wrong season for the co-working side of the business because people were still scared, people were still at home. Some people were desperate for a place where they could get work done because the office was closed, or they were full-time traveling salesmen who were pulled off the road, or they were college professors who were trying to teach a class remotely, and they needed a place where they could do that. So a lot of those people became our customers for that season of time. Now, as we're talking, we get calls or emails nearly every day of new members coming in to use the space from all different walks of life, entrepreneurs seeking community, remote workers or software developers that just need a focused place to work outside of the home, especially during the summer when the kids are home. So that's going well now, but in terms of what we did at the time, from the beginning of this business, it'd be easy to say, well, what do we do? Okay, well, we're a rental company, right? We resell office space. We get this big lease and then we sublease little spaces. It would be easy to say that, but I didn't say that. Instead, in our starting document for the company, we said we help entrepreneurs create thriving businesses. One of the ways we do that is through this co-working space. But as soon as the co-working space was a non-option, we went back, you go back up to that purpose statement.
Yes.
And said, why do we exist? Okay, well, what do entrepreneurs need right now? Oh my gosh, our community is filled with small business owners who are hemorrhaging money, trying to figure out how to succeed. And so there were a few businesses in town that were doing really well. So we got them to actually pay us to write sponsorship checks so that we could do training programs. And I actually didn't teach it. I had other local business leaders come in and teach a training program called Rebuild, where we worked with local business owners to help them rebuild their business after the lockdown and coming out of that and kind of redesign their product offerings. And so we saved local businesses. Now, we couldn't save them all. There were a couple that ended up having to permanently close, but we came back to that purpose statement of why we existed, and that became the focus. During that time, I also locked myself in my room, in my office, to write the first draft of this book because I recognized that the long-term implications of the economic crisis we didn't really understand yet, but that we needed a solution. We needed a playbook or how-to book to build a business that could succeed in any economy, no matter what's happening that's outside of your control. And so that's when I started interviewing a few dozen of my mentors, people you know as well, Jeff. I mean, I interviewed Ray Edwards, Pat Flynn, Michael Hyatt, Mike Michalowicz, many, just dozens of these mentors. And ultimately, those became episodes on the Thrive School podcast. But to start, they were just interviews where I was saying, what's working, what's not working? What do we need to do here? And I distilled all that down, pulled out the common themes, and ultimately that became the book. I mean, that's where Survive and Thrive came from.
I really like this idea you touched on of what your real purpose is. It wasn't to sublease office space. You were well positioned then, I think it sounds like, to make some quick shifts. You were more agile because you knew at the end of the day, this is our purpose, and this is one way. This office space is one way to do that. But what are the other ways? And to find local businesses who could sponsor these classes, so these other businesses who are struggling could come for free. I mean, that's just awesome. I just really love how you've worked through that. Very, very wise.
Thank you.
For a 30-year-old. No, I'm just kidding. I'm teasing. No, you're wise, period. We'll just leave it at that. Wise, period.
Thank you, Jeff.
We were talking earlier about the Dollar Shave Club. You've spent a fair amount of money with them. And the reality is that dollar razor or that dollar subscription, that's just one of the options. That might be the gateway product, perhaps. Talk about the importance of having a gateway product, a flagship product, a continuity product, et cetera.
The reality is it'd be easy to think when you want to grow your business, you either need to, do more marketing or create more products. I mean, those are kind of like the things people do. But the reality is, what I'm teaching is that you really only need 3 core businesses to succeed. Can you have more? Yes. But you really only need 3 core products. I said businesses. You don't need 3 businesses. Just because I have them doesn't mean I endorse that. It's a horrible idea. You should have 1 business with 3 products. But three core products in your business. You can have other products, but they need to relate back to these 3, and I'll explain why. The first is called your gateway product. Now, as Jeff, you mentioned, for Dollar Shave Club, this is their $1 razor, right? Where it's designed to be a painless purchase that allows someone to really just take a small risk, a small bet with your company, and to give you as the entrepreneur a chance to exceed their expectations. Like if you have an online education business, then this might be like a little kind of like a mini course or an ebook or a cheat sheet. If you have a physical product business like Dollar Shave Club, it might be this small version of transformation, which for them is this little razor. It might be something else completely differently. So for Muletown Coffee, one of my favorite coffee shops right here in Columbia, Tennessee, it's their drip coffee. It's like a $2 cup of really good coffee that they not only roasted but then brewed right there in front of you. It's the gateway product. It's a painless purchase. If you're thinking, I don't know, I'll give it a shot, you try that out. The gateway product is not designed to make you as the business owner a ton of money. It's designed to give people a chance to become part of your universe and to take a chance on you. Now, the flagship product is sort of on the other extreme. The flagship product is like the full experience. What is the epitome of transformation if someone were to go all in with your business? Now, less than 10% of your customers in most industries are typically going to ever buy your flagship product. But it should probably be one of your most expensive products. And it's designed to, in a way, it actually is a way for you to cast vision, to communicate vision to your customers that your flagship product is essentially what a winning looks like, right? And for Dollar Shave Club, just because that example, I would actually argue their flagship product is probably their bath bag. So they have this bath bag they sell, which by itself is not actually complete. So it's actually not a complete flagship product because it's not the full experience. But there's custom pockets all throughout this bath bag for all the different products. Their chapstick, the razor, the shaving cream, the aftershave, all of the many things which I bought because I wanted to fill out the little slots in the bath bag. But once I had that, I was like, okay, I have the full experience of this brand. Now, there's a lot of businesses that don't have this clear. I should say that. But like for Apple, for example, this is actually their iPhone. If you want to be fully part of the Apple world, you need to have the iPhone. It's not actually their most expensive product. They've gone a different route. Instead, they have more expensive niche products for different people who need different needs. But over 60% of their revenue comes from the iPhone alone. And then that's not counting subscription revenue or App Store revenue that comes from all the other software they sell on top of that. So that's really what leads their business. Apple is known for the iPhone, and they have all these other things. You don't need to have all the other things, that was what I'm saying. But the third category is your continuity product. And so this is a subscription product. It's a month-to-month thing, or it's a renewal of some kind. This is the glue that holds the customer experience together between transactions. So for example, instead of just waiting for someone to come back and buy the next product, where your customer experience is just based on them buying more things, this is what John Warlow calls the automatic customer. So for Apple, this comes in a few different ways. Of course, they've got Apple Music, but now they also have this program where you can get a new iPhone either every year or every 2 years. And I think it is for $100 a month. And it's like, that's a continuity product. For Dollar Shave Club, that's actually their razor, right? Because their $1 razor, is a monthly subscription, which, by the way, as soon as you buy the $1 razor, they're like, you could do that. Or, by the way, here are some supplementary products, which is one of the other categories you can teach in. So, for example, they have basically the $1 razor, the $5 razor, and the $10 or $12 razor. And of course, I, like most people, consider myself a middle-of-the-road customer. And so I bought the middle product. Most people, by the way, consider themselves a middle-of-the-road customer.
Well, when I first met John, I think it was about 5 or 6 years ago, he was at his maybe second or third stint at ChickfilA, helping them to do some training, as I recall.
Yes.
John, what did you learn from your time at ChickfilA about the power of what they call above and beyond that you still incorporate and teach today?
Yeah, well, so Chick-fil-A has an incredible practice which they adopted very early from the very beginning of their company, which is this idea of second mile service. And it actually comes from Scripture. I couldn't tell you the exact verse, but I believe it's in Matthew, where there's a verse in Christian Scripture where Christ to his disciples says, if a man asks you to go with him 1 mile, go with him 2. Now, at face value, today, in 2021, we hear that and we go, okay, all right, sure. If someone asks me to go with him 1 mile, go with him 2. But at the time, it was ludicrous because what he was referring to, what we believe he was referring to, was there was a practice by the Roman Empire at the time where a Roman soldier, keep in mind, they had roads, but they didn't have cars, right? So if you're moving a Roman soldier from one outpost to another, they're carrying about 100 pounds of armor and weapons for miles, sometimes hundreds of miles. And so along the way, they're going to get tired. The Roman Empire, who's the occupying government at the time, doesn't want their soldiers to get too tired. So they had a practice that if a Roman soldier walked up to you and said, carry my pack, you were obligated to carry it for 1 mile and no longer. So you would carry a bag of 100 pounds of armor and weapons for the soldier who's part of the oppressive regime that's controlling you, right? That's controlling your life. And so that was an incredibly difficult, it's physically difficult, but it's also just emotionally difficult for your enemy to walk up to you and say, carry 100 pounds of my weapons, which are a reminder of the fact that I own you, essentially, and carry that for 1 mile. So when Christ said, go a second mile, everyone was like, what? No, 1 mile is hard enough. But that's why it's so crazy, because the idea, and Chick-fil-A actually produced like a whole mini movie about this to kind of like live action to kind of illustrate it, that the guy, the Christian keeps walking with the pack, and the soldier's like, what are you doing? Like, that was the mile marker. And he's like, yeah, I know. And he keeps walking, and the soldier's like, no, give that back. Like, what do you, no, you fulfilled your obligation. What are you doing here? And, and the soldier is just in awe by the end of it, of the service. And that's kind of the idea here, is that comes back to what we were talking about earlier about exceeding expectations in transactions, is that the question isn't what is your obligation and to fulfill that exactly. It's how do you go above and beyond expectations, because that's where satisfaction comes in. And I actually have a whole matrix in the book that shows the math of this, but the idea being that satisfaction is equal to reality minus expectation. This is a math equation. It's how my brain works. Just trust me on this one. But the idea being that if your expectation is high, but your reality is low, I guess I got the math switch. So if your expectation is high, but your reality is low, in other words, your expectations were not met. When that happens, then you're disappointed. The only time you're satisfied is when your expectations are exceeded. Because if someone does it exactly, or like if someone does exactly what you expected, you owe each other nothing, and so you're neutral. Is that what you want? Is that what you want? Neutral customers? No. So go above and beyond.
By the way, that's Matthew 5:41.
Thank you.
That's right off the top of my. No, I'm just kidding. I found it in your book, actually. So
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Well, I've had, you mentioned Mike Michalowicz earlier.
Yeah.
I've had him on the show a couple of times, but we have not had the chance with him to dig in to probably what is known as his best book, his best known book, and that's Profit First. As a fan of his work, how has this concept impacted you and your businesses? Speaking of math.
Yeah, speaking of math. Well, first of all, I dedicated an entire chapter of my book to just basically saying, listen to Mike Michalowicz and practice profit first. So there's no other author that I've spent as much time, promoting his work. I've paid money to go through his certification program, so I'm a certified Fix This Next advisor, and read every book he's ever written, including some of the early ones that he doesn't talk about as much. First of all, I would say it's impacted me immensely, but maybe it'd be helpful just to give a brief summary of kind of where the idea comes from, which it's a financial philosophy. It's that ideally profit is typically looked at, like when it's taught in business, it's like profit is the money that's left over. You have your revenue or your sales, and then you have your expenses, and then what's left over is profit. And Mike says no, and he flips that. Instead, he says your expenses is what's left over. He says, revenue minus profit is how much money you have for your expenses. You need to take out profit first. And he makes a really strong case for the fact that that's really why most businesses fail, is because they don't have margin built in, or a lot of businesses at least, they don't have margin built in really to pay the owners, to have a reserve fund or any of these things. And so they just spend whatever they make, and then when something bad happens, they don't really have a cushion to adapt. So this has personally impacted me. The first time I told Mike this, I had a chance to tell him this in an interview. I said the first time I ever practiced profit first, and he has this whole system that's really brilliant, honestly, for how you do this, how you use it. He has like percentages you take out of your business for profit or for taxes or for, all those kind of things, and operation expenses. The first time I ever applied it to my business, then I gave myself, as if I was like a shareholder in my own company, I gave myself a $500 bonus check. And I thought, this is amazing. And I seriously thought about it. I said, I should send this to Mike as a thank you. And then I thought, nah. And I took my wife out for the weekend on this little retreat, just like a weekend getaway. And I had a chance to tell Mike that and apologize that I didn't send him the $500. But he said, no, I love that. He said, I love that because what you did was because you taught yourself and your wife that your work deserves reward. And you're going to do more of it because of that. And so he thanked me for not sending him the $500.
If you're ever inclined to send me $500, you go right ahead and do that.
Go right ahead. Good to know. I'll make a note of that. Thank you, Jeff.
Just kidding. Well, speaking of chapters dedicated to ideas and concepts, there's a chapter dedicated to the idea of charging up front.
Yeah.
And you insist that we design a business and not a bank. What's the distinction here that we need to understand?
It all comes back to this really nerdy question of, are you cash flow positive or not in your business? And by the way, as an aside, there's the secret system in the book. After chapter 1, there's 3 chapters of marketing, 3 chapters of sales, and 3 chapters of finance. So that's the secret kind of infrastructure behind the book. But that's why we're talking about financial things now, because these are important. In my mind, you can't talk about making money without talking about keeping it and spending it wisely. So we cover that as well. Basically, the idea comes down to the fact that there are expenses in your business. Maybe your time, and maybe if you're buying goods like coffee beans or razor blades, there's some expenses in your business. That's just part of doing business. But if you put all the burden on yourself to pay for all of the expenses and put in all the time for all of the work to create your products or services before you get paid, then essentially you're operating as a bank. You're financing your customer's transaction. And so the reverse of that is when a customer pays you up front. So this is the most straightforward with services. If you're a consultant, if you're a freelancer, you can bid a project. If you can get paid for the entire project in the front end and then do the work, then you're cash flow positive. Now, I also have several scenarios in the book of like, okay, well, let's just say your client's not going to agree to pay you for the whole thing up front. Typically, you can get many clients to agree to 50% up front and 50% on the back end, in which case that 50% on the front should be covering all of your raw costs, and the 50% on the back end may just be your profit off of that job. But at least if something goes south, you've already received that first payment. I hate hearing stories from freelancers who've done a bunch of work for someone and they got stiff. They didn't get paid. But that's in their control, because if you require payment on the front end, it's not going to happen. Now, in a product-based business, it can be a little more complicated, but it's the same idea. It's saying, when does someone pay you? At what point in the transaction? And you want to be as cash flow positive as possible. I've worked with clients where their business is not cash flow positive. And so they have complicated spreadsheets showing how like, okay, so we paid all this money for all this equipment and inventory right now. And then, 3 months from now, we're hoping enough people buy it that it pays it back. But if not, we have this big loan with the bank. Like they're actually not taking out their own reserves at this point. They're working with the bank. But banks operate on this whole philosophy. That's the business model of a bank, is to say, I'll give you money and charge a small interest rate. But banks even assume that between 1% to 10% of all loans will just fail. That's just built into their math. But are you building your business so that between 1% to 10% of your customers can just not pay and you're cool with that? Most entrepreneurs would say no. Then I would encourage you to become cash flow positive.
Well, let me switch gears now. I've got a couple of questions I want to ask,
Sure.
not directly related to the book. But before I do that, anything else from the book you want to make sure that we know that I didn't ask about?
Well, the age of information is over. I feel like that's pretty big. But, it's something that I cover right off the bat in the book in chapter 1. But, I mean, it's just we're shifting. The whole world is shifting from this age of information to age of insight. And that's not uniquely my insight. The World Economic Forum has been kind of beating this drum for a while, but it's a shift that I see happening where all of a sudden business is not about getting people access to supplies or information, because most products, like at my friends who own a coffee roasting company, I asked him, I said, well, how much coffee could you produce this year? He said, I don't know, probably about 30,000 pounds. I said, could you produce more? He's like, well, yeah, I guess we'd have to get a bigger machine. I said, okay, so then how much could you produce? All of it. We live in this world where supply is not quite infinite, but pretty close to it. And so now business is about owning demand and about communicating not information, which is sort of just like the chaos of all the facts, but just the distilled down insight of what are the 2 or 3 things that your customers need to know. And so people crave curators who can translate the chaos of information to just the 2 or 3 things they need to know. And that's going to be a shift that's going to continue to happen over the next couple decades that I think is going to be huge.
That's part of the impetus behind launching the Read to Lead podcast, is helping people understand, well, what books do I need to be paying attention to? Whose books do I need to buy, et cetera? Well, speaking of books, as I watched the tour video this morning of you walking us through your co-working space, one of the things I noticed right off the bat is you've got a library there. Actually sell some books for entrepreneurs who use your space. I know you're a fan of books. Give us some insight into your history with reading, and how would you say it's impacted your success?
More than anything else. I can't think of anything that's had a greater impact on me than reading.
Wow.
I started reading. So my mom has interesting philosophy. I'm her oldest child, and we were homeschooled, and that she didn't force me to learn how to read until I wanted to. And so I didn't actually start to learn to read till I was 7.
Wow.
But within a few months, I was reading chapter books, and by the end of the year, I was reading full-length novels. And then I spent most of my teenage years reading literally hundreds of books. Every once in a while now, I didn't keep track of them. So every once in a while now, we'll come across a book or someone will reference it. I'm like, oh yeah, I read that. I just devoured them. And so all fiction books, though. I didn't read nonfiction until college, and that was like a whole other thing. I was like, wait a second. You mean the secrets to all of the solutions to all of my problems were just sitting on the shelves this whole time?
I totally get that.
Yeah. So while I love fiction, that's where it started, I then began voraciously devouring nonfiction books. Specifically one book, there's so many books that have had a great impact on me, but a few that have had the biggest would be the book Platform, Get Noticed in a Noisy World by Michael Hyatt. I read that cover to cover on a flight to Alaska, to Anchorage. So it was a long flight. But I read that thing cover to cover, and when I landed, I realized everything has changed. My whole understanding about what I'm going to do with my life is different. And that's when I launched. I already had a blog, but it was called The Open-Minded Economist. No one knew who I was. That's when I launched johnmeese.com. That's when I really started building my brain around myself and building a platform. And then ultimately, it actually gave me a job because I ran Platform University for 3 years. But then the other book that's had the greatest impact on me has been Essentialism by Greg McKeown. Because everything I do, actually the original title to this book was called Essentialist Marketing. I still own essentialistmarketing.com, the domain, but it's the idea of saying do less but better, apply that to your business. So those are the 2 books that have had the greatest impact on me personally.
Well, let me ask you finally this. What's ahead for you as you look at CoWork Inc., Notable, the Thrive School podcast, anything around the corner in particular that you're excited about and able to talk about currently?
Yeah. Everything I do comes back to helping entrepreneurs to build thriving businesses. So, I'm really excited as you and I are talking, we're actually in the process of rolling out a whole new offer, a new product just at least a new approach to our products with Notable, my software company. So if you have any desire in building an online platform as a author, as a podcaster, blogger, YouTuber, definitely go to notable.press. And, we're building this tool for you. So I'd love to, share that with you. But on the CoWork Inc. side, that's now actually kind of becoming the home for the Thrive School podcast. We're launching the Thrive School newsletter. We're launching a new membership site called Thrive School Pro, designed to give entrepreneurs a community with coaches where you can get access to the training you need to succeed, whether you're starting something from scratch or you want to scale a business that really supports your life, fuels your life rather than the other way around. And this is the one that I haven't announced anywhere. So this is the one that's like, all right, take a deep breath. But I'm launching a conference called Built to Thrive Live.
Awesome.
And we just signed the deal on the venue. So it'll be October 14th at the Mule House in Columbia, Tennessee. And it'll be, it's going to be a blast. And so we've already got some great speakers lined up, including a mutual friend of ours, Mike Kim, Joseph Bojang, Alex Sanfilippo, all be speaking as well. And it'll be the first conference. I've been the MC at conferences. I've been speakers at conferences, but this is the first one that's like, I'm hosting it and saying, welcome, come into my world and we want to serve you. So I'm excited about that. That one doesn't have a website yet. So you'll just have to go to johnmeese.com, I guess, and find it, or CoWork.inc. But as you and I are talking, it's just, we just signed the contract. So.
Wow. And that's for this coming October.
Yeah.
We're not talking October 22. Okay.
No, I'm talking 2021. I mean, we're planning to do it like every year or multiple times a year.
Okay.
But the first one we just sealed the deal on will be this October.
Awesome. Congratulations. Well, the book we've been talking about again today is called Survive and Thrive, How to Build a Profitable Business in Any Economy, including this one. My copy is signed by the author and is even personalized. I suggest you search a version of that out for yourself as well. Find it on Amazon, everywhere books are sold. John, thank you for being here. Really enjoyed talking to you about your book.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And I will say, if you go to surviveandthrivebook.com, there's some bonuses that go with the book. So if you order it, put your order info in there, you'll get some of those bonuses that will help you really put it to practice in your business. I hope that helps.
There are several links to books and other resources I've included on the show notes page for this episode per our conversation today with John Meese. You can find all of that at readtoleadpodcast.com/388 for episode 388. There's a link there, too, for more information on my brand new book, Read to Lead, The Simple Habit That Expands Your Influence and Boosts Your Career. You can also find out more about that book at readtoleadbook.com. I'm delighted to tell you that on the reviews side, Read to Lead, the book is averaging about 4.9 out of 5 stars at Amazon and other retail outlets where you can find the book. If you're one of those who's reviewed it, thank you so much for doing that. That goes a long way and means a ton. Again, more about the book at readtoleadbook.com. I'm looking forward to next week as I'll be welcoming back for the third or fourth time, I've lost count, one of my favorite guests. Her name is Dory Clark. She's written a book called The Long Game, and she's here next week to talk about it. That's next time on the Read to Lead podcast. Well, that's going to do it for this week. I look forward to seeing you next time. Until then, remember, as always, leaders read and readers lead.